Hello, everyone. So I just wanted to come on here and do a short video on the books that I'm reading for December, because I know that when I post videos, it's kind of it's random, or it might seem random, kind of is. So all of these books are really just a continuation of November. I just didn't finish any of them because I read multiple books at the same time. So that said, let's get into it. So, as you all know, I'm reading Angela Di Foligno. So there's quite in these editions of this is the what is it called? The Classics of Western Spirituality. So in this, it's by Paulus Press, and they usually have quite a hefty introduction. So what I do, I have my bookmarks in both places. So I kind of go back and forth between reading the historical context and the commentary and the introduction and the actual primary text. So I'm really interested in this, and I'm loving it so far. So I just think that it's really interesting if you're going through your own spiritual awakening to read. Oh, I have my booklight to read about other people's spiritual awakenings, even like in the medieval ages. I think it's really interesting and relatable. So I'm also reading a Swedenborg sampler. So right now I'm still in the first text because it's quite long. I think it's one of his most popular ones, called Heaven and Hell. Swedenborg has he's a really interesting person. So supposedly he was a visionary. When was he born? I'm thinking he lived in there. See, and this is why I should take notes. Okay, so he was born in 1688 and he died in 1772. He was kind of I guess he was kind of a psychic or like prophetic. He had these visions. He had various, I guess, near-death experiences or experiences where he was allowed to see other realms, and he was able to receive wisdom and knowledge from those realms, from angels, to see what happens after you die, etc. And his ideas are so interesting. His idea of heaven and hell is that you are going to go into the place where you are meant to go. He says even that people who, people who belong in hell they would find heaven hellish. So even like the smells of hell, they delight in and love, and are horrified by, the fresh air of heaven. And so inversely. And basically, I think that all people become angels. You keep sort of an earthly human form in the other realm, except that your outer body aligns with your inner like affections. So basically, if you have a beautiful soul, you will be beautiful, and if you don't, then you will not be. So I think it's really interesting, but it also, I feel, is somewhat problematic because it puts one into a situation where you want to do something and be like a good person, etc., for the reward, or to avoid the punishment, even though it doesn't necessarily, no one feels like they're being punished, I guess, since people who go to hell want to go to hell, I suppose, and that's their fitting sort of abode and home. But if you want to, it's just kind of like traditional Christianity, where you heard on Sunday school, like, you get a bigger mansion, the bigger your heart is and soul is. And I don't necessarily think that's the healthiest path to spirituality, but I'm just starting to read him. So I think that he's pretty fascinating, regardless of that problematic idea. So I'm also reading Martin Heidegger's What is Called Thinking. So this is my second-ish Heidegger book. After Being in Time, I'm also kind of in the middle of reading two other Heidegger books, but this is the one I'm focusing on. And I'd really like to finish it before I do any video, just because it is an entire conversation and I really want to see where it goes. But so far, I think it's really interesting. I mean, he does his, typical like etymology, looking at the origin of words and the meaning, all the various meanings, that might be like in Greek or Latin or, Old English, and kind of takes those definitions and adds them to our understanding of thought, etc. So one thing I was reading recently is that he looks at the I guess the root word of thought in think. So thought has something to do with thankfulness. He also talks about, before that, he talked a lot about Nietzsche and how Nietzsche really was kind of engaged in this conversation as well. And in Nietzsche, what he takes from him, thus spoke Zarathustra and the gay science, etc., is that the new sort of evolved person will not be resentful. So there's this idea of gratitude. There's this idea of, not being, how are, we resentful today in our modern world. And then also, it seems like where he's headed is that thought, true thought, elevated, pure, authentic thought, is devotional and meditative. I think he has this sort of tendency to want to find the sacred in things, which is why I find Heidegger liturgy to me, regardless of his problematic history. I'm trying to put off reading the book about his relationship with Hannah Arendt, because I want to enjoy and like his works before I start, I don't know, maybe not liking him as much and letting the personal affect, my reading of his works. So I am reading, in my last video I showed you, I'm reading the Essential Kabbalah, and I'm just kind of making my way through it. I really like reading these spiritual readings at night when I'm kind of like it's mostly dim, I'm turning off all the lights. So because I have dealt with a sleeping condition, which is much better now since I've sort of removed things that could cause me stress. Some people can do everything and it's fine, but others of us ruminate too much to, to be able to do everything and still have like space in our minds to be quiet. So stress was a big factor in, reducing stress was a big factor in helping me sleep. And also meditation, and also resetting my circadian rhythm. So trying to get morning light and trying to put tech away at night. And when there's no longer natural light, I just don't turn on light. So I do have this reading lamp that I use. And then, so I'm mostly like reading these spiritual readings at night. And I really feel like even though they have different cosmologies, for instance, the Kabbalah, the Zohar, the Torah, they have a different cosmology than, like, say, the Gnostics, which I'm reading as well. And then Steiner is also added to that, and Swedenborg and Angela de Foligno. So there are these different paths, Jewish esoteric, mysticism, the medieval Catholic mystics, and then the Gnostics. So different ideas, but I think they all can feed the soul, and you can find I mean, I think really just the frequencies of, the messages really matter, and you can find truth in every reading or message. Even if it's the opposite of truth, it still leads you to truth. So the other one is the Essential Zohar, which I'm reading through. Then I have two Rudolf Steiners, which I haven't made a video over any of these yet. Again, I just need to sit down and take notes and see what I can say. I started reading the Riddles of Philosophy because I thought I was going to participate in a reading group, but I could just never make the meetings. And I think I read a lot more slowly than the sort of the reading schedule. So I'm always behind when I'm reading, because I don't know. Yeah, I'm just savoring it perhaps. But Rudolf Steiner is a really interesting person because his works, I think he got into more of the esoteric sort of his spiritual writings a little bit later in life. So this is mainly the Riddles of Philosophy. It's a very philosophical text, as well as the Philosophy of Freedom, which, interestingly enough, he wanted to name this the Philosophy of Spiritual Activity. But I guess his editors and other people, the translators, are sticking with freedom because they said readers would understand it more. But I don't know. I understand spiritual activity a lot more, and I try to keep that in mind. But the Riddles of Philosophy, I think he's trying to, make the point that human beings have been focused on very particular questions that don't seem to have an answer, and we've been trying to figure out, just thinking about all of the branches of philosophy, we're trying to figure out what is the limit to human knowledge. Is there a limit? Is there, like questions of epistemology, right? Is there only what we can see, and that is in our mind, and that's the only reality we can know? Is that the only reality that exists? Or is there an actual reality, a thing in itself that, if only we could adjust our minds or try to infer from the organization of our minds and our lenses that we have to look through, could we see it, or could we know it even in part? So he's kind of going through the course of history of philosophy, kind of looking at these questions, looking at what people have come up with. I think in the sort of design or goal to answer the riddle, which he is kind of doing in this book. So, I think the challenging thing about Rudolf Steiner is he keeps bringing up all of these different philosophers that are not necessarily mainstream, that modern philosophers would read. Very sort of obscure. He even says, no one reads these people, but they should. So, and then the last book that I am reading is the Gnostic Bible. I am, I guess, not quite halfway finished with this. But basically the Gnostics were a version of like one or some of the Christianities that kind of cropped up in the like first and second and third centuries. And there are various sort of Gnostic groups, but they all seem to have in common like a certain sort of understanding of a revisionist sort of approach to Genesis and the Hebrew scriptures, and also but through sort of this Christian lens. And it's not necessarily that they were sort of heretical or a fringe group of Christianity. there were just a diversity of Christianities, and, certain of them won out. And when the Bible, like the Christian scriptures, the Bible got canonized, then, certain books were left out. And that includes the Gnostic Bible, some of the texts from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it became like the Apocrypha. But the Gnostic texts are specifically ones that understand the world as being imperfect, and so therefore created by an imperfect lesser God. So it's demiurgical. So basically there is like an original, ineffable, perfect creative source, but that source beget thoughts that beget, various luminaries that beget, etc., different kinds of beings. And every generation decreased in spirit and goodness. And so you have this particular God who kind of mimics the monologue of Lucifer, saying, having pride and thinking that, being arrogant and saying that he is the best God and he's going to create beings. But then he became jealous, though, of the human beings, because he was kind of almost tricked into breathing the good in him, speaking about the demiurge, the spirit within, into the human beings. And so that's why, so basically they're saying that the actual God of the Hebrew texts is not the one true perfect God, but it's like a lesser God. But human beings do have the spirit. And this is why I think that, if you watch Gaia.com, a lot of it's based on the Gnostic text, and a lot of it's based on the New Thought movement as well, which I guess that's the other book that I'm reading, but I don't have an actual copy of it. Like, I just have printouts. So I'll mention that as well. But basically, it's the purpose of human beings to remember and to come into contact with our divine spark. And this is also the understanding of the Kabbalah, the Kabbalistic writings. They also mention that, although they understand the God of the Torah as being like the good God, like the perfect God, the highest God. So the Gnostics have a little bit of a more complicated kind of, I guess, mythological, like, family structure. So this is beautiful and fascinating, just, looking at some of the other revisionist characters, like the serpent being the one who is a higher being who wants to help the human beings out. And so the reason that God, pushed Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden, that was not the main God, that was the jealous God, because he was afraid of human beings, like our ability to spiritually evolve and become like the gods. And so he just didn't want to help us at all. So that's really interesting. The other book that I'm reading, or that I have read, and I guess I haven't really been like rereading it too much, but it's a small book, and it's called The Science of Getting Rich, and it's by W.D. Waddles. I kind of thought about doing a whole video on it, but I don't know, it's going to be dark soon, and I just didn't think I had time to go through it. But basically, there's this, I guess, kind of like offshoot of Christianity, called the New Thought movement, that was established in the late 19th century, early 20th century. Mainly, it seems like it kind of coalesced, or started by Elizabeth Towns, and I think maybe her husband, one of her husbands, like a newspaper, or like they had like a literary pamphlet called The Nautilus. And The Science of Getting Rich was one of the texts that I think maybe in a series or something was published. I don't quote me on that, but it came out in 1910. And basically the New Thought movement is kind of one of the, I guess, origins or stopping points of ideas of the law of attraction and a metaphysical understanding of the mind control, that you can manifest what you are thinking. And it's kind of like your thoughts are going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you should manifest good, positive kind of ideas. And I really like The Science of Getting Rich because it talks about how everyone is abundant. Everyone is abundance. And there is this original, like, formless spirit that longs to create and meet our desires. But we have to get out of this competitive, individualistic mindset, because that would be too like low frequency for this divine formless spirit that wants to help us. So it's not that. So I guess the unfulfilling sort of path to economics and financial success is the individualistic and the competitive, that, oh, I have to be special. I have to be the one that's making money and fight out all of the other people and enjoy my wealth. There's not enough to go around, when that's not really the truth. They are, I guess, it's the idea of Waddles in The Science of Getting Rich, that they are sort of manifesting their riches, but they're not going to be ultimately satisfied because they don't incorporate the sort of frequencies of generosity and sharing. So he says that, you just have to be very disciplined and visualize what you want every day, but in the spirit of, I also want other people to have their best lives and to be abundant. And basically he's saying that there's not limited resources, that formless spirit will add to the material as needed. And so everyone can be comfortable and be quote unquote rich. And so, I mean, I don't necessarily think that means like excessively rich, but, reasonably comfortable, where you don't have to obsess or worry about money and you can live the life that you want. So he says everyone can do that. And so if you visualize the kind of life that you want, and you have faith and you believe and you think about it in terms of love and generosity that you're going to share, at least you're going to share not always that you're going to share your money, but that you're going to share the ideas and the path and the way, and encourage people and give them opportunities and give them jobs or whatever, etc. Hoping and wanting them to also grow, because there will always be people to replace them, to learn and start their own journey. So I think it does relate to my channel, which is why I wanted to do a video on it, and I might in the future, just to kind of go more in depth, but anyone can find it on the internet. It's just a PDF and it's about 80 pages or something. You could read it in a day, but it basically says, it wants you to read it again and again, so you get it in your head. And it also says, one of the other interesting things, and this is the last thing I'll say about it, because this video is not about that, is that we also can't be in the mindset of being resentful, which reminds me of Heidegger and the pure thought. We also can't be resentful of the people who are rich and who are of the 1%, etc. We can't be angry at the government or our economic system or just the way capitalism works. because because that is the reality that we have, that everyone has to work with. And we are the ones keeping ourselves down. It's not necessarily the structure, it's our lack of knowledge about how to grow and become in the place that we want. And again, it's not that there always needs to be the have-nots in order to be the haves. This text really says everyone can be a have, and everyone should be. That is our sort of divine right and purpose, that everyone needs to be rich, because we can't live our best lives. We could live our best lives if we were, because then those who want, a nice house and a big family would have that wherever in the world they want to live. Those people who want to travel and like, commune with beautiful landscapes and nature, which is me, would have that and be able to go and not say, well, I don't have money for this, I don't have money for this, but it's opening yourself to receive. So I don't know. So that's the other book. I guess that is the book that I finished in November, because it took me like a day or two to read it. I think I did read it in a day. So anyway, those are my books. So hopefully I will do videos on all of those. And I'm trying to just limit myself to like 7 or 8 books, so I can eventually finish some of them. But in the future, I do want to add the 2 other books that I have of Heidegger. I also want to read Hegel, Phenomenology of Spirit, because I started out with Hegel, the philosophy of right, I think. And so I also want to read The Birth of Tragedy by Nietzsche, and just continue on with reading more medieval mystics when I get finished with Angela. So that's it. If you have any book suggestions for me, or if you want me to make a video about one book more sooner than the other, let me know. So I'm sorry this wasn't necessarily a lecture. It was just a like chat housekeeping, what books I'm reading. But I will definitely have like a typical lecture next week. I hope all of you are well. And if you want to also comment below what books you are reading, if you also read many books at the same time, go for it.